thank you for coming out and trying to support our school and our learners and our co-workers, so we really appreciate it. So let's see who's in the room. First, I'll go around and see if there's any staff stuck around. Trying to see. Go ahead. You want to start, Chris? Just introduce yourself, where you are.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm in the 3 to 6, so early ed.
Watch for me. Amy?
I'm Amy Adams. I teach with Faith in the 3 to 6 studio, kindergarten studio. And I also lead the Girl Scout 7-year days.
And you have children.
Oh, and I have children. And one in Diamond and one in Rainforest.
I had children here, for instance.
Both graduated from here.
Yes, I did. Mine is Faith. I'm in kindergarten with Amy, and it's 3 to 6.
Melissa?
Hi, I'm Melissa Wiesinger. I'm an expansion development coordinator, and I also have a kiddo here in 3 to 6.
Oh, you let me skip me.
Go ahead.
I'm Glenn, family liaison. I had 2 daughters that have actually graduated from Montessori as well.
I'm Katie S. I'm in Rainforest from 6 to 9, and I went to school here.
Now she's a teacher here. Woo. It's our second graduate that's been employed at Community Montessori. So with 240 graduates now. Very cool. And then some PIP councils members that are here. You know, I saw some of you walk in. Okay. You want to introduce yourself?
I'm Jessica Denton, and I'm on the PIP Council. I work with membership, and I've got one child here right now. He's in Rainforest, 6 to 9.
I'm Sasha Polstick. I'm on the Food Council, and I have one learner here, one graduating, and Jefferson's in Tycoon.
It's weird to say as it was the first time. First to you.
And I'm Sarah Polstick. I'm on Food Council. I have 4. One in Sycamore, Tycoon, Turquoise, and
How many here have learners in the 3 to 6 program? 6 to 9? 9 to 12? 12 to 14? 14 to 18? Did you notice how the hands started to get less when we got older? We'll get back to that. How many of you have volunteered before at the school? How many of you have subbed before? And there's several of you that are super subs, and we really, really appreciate you. Come in consistently. Sarah, Sasha's pointing to her sister, Sarah. Sister-in-law? I always get that confused. Yeah. Totally. Thank you. So please, many of you that have done this before, please chime in. What I try to do is I watch and listen and do, and then I try to figure out how to best help our staff and children be the best they can for each studio. So, all right, Kristen, right? Katie, darn it, I'm sorry. Katie's going to be my special assistant tonight. So you can go right ahead. So that's just a picture of the staff. We just talked about everybody. And actually, let's go ahead and flip again. I'm going to pull us out, start a little bit different this year, and start with a video. Does anyone know who this is? I know you know the one on the right. Okay. Does anyone know the woman on the left? Her name's Dr. Shefali Sabari. And so a few years ago, and Valerie's here somewhere, helped me with that, we did a workshop on conscious parenting, which is a really cool book that she wrote. Her newest book is called The Awakened Child. And so part of this conversation tonight is just talking about what we do and how we do. Sometimes really things very differently than what other schools might do. And so I thought it'd be cool to start with this because you're all here first as parents. And those parental instincts and how to support children here, it's important. So.
Can I turn this around so that...
So what does it mean to be a conscious parent? A conscious parent is not one who seeks to fix her child or seek to produce or create the perfect child. This is not about perfection. The conscious parent understands that this journey has been undertaken. This child has been called forth to raise the parent itself. to show the parent where the parent yet has to grow. This is why we call our children into our lives.
Wow. You know, on Super Soul Sunday, we use the word conscious and consciousness interchangeably with spiritual.
Yes.
And interchangeably, I think consciousness, awareness, spirituality are all the same.
Yes.
Is that what you're talking about?
Definitely. As a parent, however, it becomes slightly different because the parent-child relationship, I think, is like none other. It's like none other. Because what other relationship will bring you to the call of your ego like the one you have with your child? I mean, children will trigger us like no one else because they are ours. My child. I will be a parent. I'm going to be the best mother. You know, we enter the journey thinking that our children will fulfill this idealized version of ourselves. And every time they do that, we applaud them. But every time they fall short of that, that's when we get triggered and we get activated. But what our children are really doing is showing us a mirror to our undeveloped self.
Woo! Are you ready to work on your undeveloped self?
Feel like such a joyful.
So, our undeveloped self. You know, Maria Montessori called it the spiritual preparation of the adult. And we're going to talk about that some tonight. But really, what I hope that you leave with tonight is to think more about yourself and about your role with your child. And then maybe how you roll with your child inside these walls on this campus might be a little different and what that might look like. And I will tell you that many people that volunteer in sub say that it's changed the way they parent their child. And so if anyone wants to share an example of that, they're welcome to do that throughout this conversation. But I know for myself it was. You know, my daughter was my teacher. She brought me to my oldest, brought me to my ego a lot. I remember when I first went through my first Montessori training, I'd just been doing this for a couple of months. I came home with the movable alphabet. Who knows what the movable alphabet is? Okay? I'm like, now I'm going to teach her to read. I'm like, come on, child, let me show you the movable alphabet. I'm not doing that. What do you mean you're not doing that? This is the thing, you know, in my mind. This is what I thought. And I thought Montessori had all to do with the materials, but you know it doesn't. It has to do with us. And it has to do with us and understanding that undeveloped self and how we respond and work with and engage with and observe ourselves and the child and that relationship. And when we do that really well, we have this beautiful thing that happens within each environment throughout the building. And it creates such a space for learning that's unmeasurable, really. Because children and adults can work in a collaborative environment throughout that whole learning journey for that child all the way up. So when my children started here, Glenn and my children, 2.5 and 5 years old, they taught us along the way. And so I hope that as we talk tonight and we share these conversations, and please interrupt and please ask questions, because this has to be something that you get from this experience. And there's a test at the end, so we'll talk about that. To volunteer, sub, or both. We hope that each family chooses to do both. 98% of our subbing throughout the school is done by parents on purpose. What do other schools do? Oh, come on, you've seen the park. But what do they do? Have you seen the signs out in the yards? It's not normally Floyd County's hiring subs. It's a staffing agency, right? And so many of them have just gone in that process. Can you imagine having someone off the streets come in here and sub in this environment, what that might look like for your children? Right? So that's why we don't do that. I know lots of Montessori schools that do, because it's easier that way. This is a lot more work for myself, for Faith, who supports the subbing, which I'm going to talk about her in just a second. But, you know, we really want it to be as consistent and stable and supportive as possible. And so if you've never subbed and you think, maybe I'll try it, let me remind you of a couple things. One of which is, you're not going to be alone. You don't have to do anything on your own. You don't have to, teach a lesson. So you're there as a support person for the co-teacher that's still there. When I developed the model of a co-teaching model, one of the reasons was It would help that other person to have someone to talk off of. I believe one of the main reasons that teachers get burned out is because they're all on the island by themselves most of the day. And so it's a lot more expensive to do what we're doing. And it takes a lot more care in this co-teacher, some of us call it arranged marriage process, because you're with this person and we talk and we do all the training, and sometimes the match is just amazing. And most of the time it becomes amazing through that experience. But we really try to make it so that if you come in to support, you're there as a support person, kind of like as an assistant for a little bit. You're there to make sure that they can still keep doing their role for the day, and you can be overseen and coming to get them if there's an issue. So I hope that if you're here only to volunteer and go on that going out trip once or twice a year, or be here for the last day of school activities, you'll reconsider to come in and sub every once in a while, because it really will make a difference, I think, for most of you and your children. If you do want to sub, if you haven't subbed before, we really encourage you to volunteer first, to come in first and spend a half a day or a day in whichever class or studios that you think you might want to be a part of. So this is a good time to introduce Faith. Faith's been here for, 116 years? 12 years? 13 years. So Faith took on the role of what's called the studio sub-coordinator. So prior to Faith's role, 5 years ago, of being the sub-coordinator, is that staff would just call their own subs. And the feedback we got from families was, I'm getting 9 calls a day. They're like, okay, wait a minute, that's not working smarter. How can we work smarter? And so we started throwing it around, and Faith took on that challenge to be the sub-coordinator. So she coordinates probably 80% of the subs, all of the last minute kind of subs. So if someone gets ill or something, instead of them trying to call or communicate, they communicate to Faith. Each studio has already kind of addressed a list for currently what they have for subs, and then she starts communicating with you. And so she's a really special person, and so we just ask you to just reply to her. If you are subbing and you can't be there, just let her know that, and then she can take you off the list. Did you think that's one of the most important pieces, Faith? Anything else you want to add to that for now?
If I typically will call you first before I just send you a text out of nowhere and say, can you sub tomorrow? But if I do send you a text and ask you to sub, it's really handy if you can't just to say no. If people often don't want to reply back no because they don't want to be seen as informative or whatever, or hurt your feelings, you're not. Just gonna say no if you can't. Everyone can't sometimes, or if you're like, geez, lady, don't talk to me again about this, you can say that too.
I don't know how I got on your list.
I will keep going.
Yeah.
So definitely know if you can't, or if a day comes along. So don't hesitate to say, no, I can't today, but call me next time.
Mm-hmm. And so, sometimes it's early in the morning, and we get that for some of us, we like to have these things planned out. But I don't know many staff members who know. It's maybe 20% that know the night before. Maybe 10. Usually they're hardworking people. They're like, no, I'll be fine tomorrow. And then they're on death's doorknob and they go, okay, I guess I need a sub. So if she's calling you or texting you early in the morning, it's just because we're trying to make the most consistent environments for your children every day. And so you can just say, like, it's just really not a good day. Or maybe the second half of the day will work for me. Like anything like that you can give her back will really help and keep that process going. If you choose only to volunteer, you should work with those specific staff members and make a plan for how you would like to get involved. So, not everyone can volunteer. The staff gets to decide who's in the studio. Not because we don't think you're all lovely people, but you want to make sure that the most consistent people are with your children every day. And so, if you want to say, I'm here because I want to go into Tundra every afternoon and do X, Y, and Z, Tundra might not feel like it's the best fit right now. And that's okay. And especially if you want to go with the studio where your child is. It might not be the best time yet. And so we can help you in other ways. Like if you want to volunteer, if you're like, I really have Thursdays off and I just love to do, crocheting with children. And Tundra doesn't feel like that my child's ready for me to be in the studio yet because they act very differently right now. Then maybe they can help you set it up for you to go do that in a different studio for a while. So we want to help you get connected, but it may not always be the right time or the right place with your studio. So hang in there. In most cases, we can make a process that fits, but there is kind of a process to that. Make sense? Each studio also supports a common space ability that they keep beautiful. You might support learners with that space each week, for example. So maybe you just have like Tuesday afternoons and you'd love to come in. And so, you might support the rabbit cage, or you might support the Coliseum. So this, let's see, I think it's Sapphire that has this space. So every studio has a common space that they oversee and support. Coliseum, not as difficult as the pantry or the CSL, which gets a lot of food around. So those people that have those areas have to get some volunteers to really help with that process too. So I talked about our co-teaching model, that people aren't in charge of that. Please consider subbing to learn and grow. This gives great peace of mind to staff in their absence. So when they know that they have people that they can trust and support, it helps them to heal their body, or for what, visit with family or whatever it is that they're not able to be in the studio for that day. How to be a super parent, as a sub. After attending a review video, fill out the workshop questionnaire. That's that assessment. I told you we're going to do a test in a minute. It's going to be towards the end. If you leave, you can't be on the summer volunteer list. You have to stay. But I won't make you sit with a dentist cap or anything like that. But we'll go over the questions together. Communicate to faith, we just talked about. You'll get a piece of paper that you'll fill out that tells you all those volunteer times. Let the curve desk know if you'll be volunteering your time or getting paid. Paid stubs will fill out an information packet. So, per the labor guidelines, all of our subs go on payroll. And so it's become a very consistent thing. Another reason why a lot of schools outsource that. It costs us a lot of money to put all of our subs on payroll. Kelly Coots, who works up at the cupola, does all the financial pieces. So if you don't think you're going to sub consistently, please don't fill out the packet yet. Make sure that's something that you want to do, because it costs us probably $175 just to put you on payroll. After we do the background check, which costs $26, and all the other paperwork that we have and put all of those pieces. So we ask you, maybe volunteer your first time to make sure this is something you want to do consistently. But if you do want to get paid for it, there is a packet. And so if you come in and sub for a day, we really need you to fill out that packet before you leave, and if you want to get paid for that day. So does that make sense? So it has things on there like a W-2 and all those, W-4, yeah, I-9, all of those pieces of information. Ask questions and seek understanding. That's really important to us. Learning to observe without impeding what's happening with the child. So we're going to get more into that. It's different at each level, but in most cases, you'll find with the staff that we sit and watch for a minute before we react or respond. And so for some of us in the room, that's automatic, and for others of us, we have to turn on the manual switch because we see something happen and we want to react to it. Like the 3-year-old who just put their coat on all by themselves and their hood's hanging down here at their bottom. And you want to go fix it for them because it's not on right. You don't want them to be embarrassed or cold or whatever. And we will hold. And if that child tells us that they need help or that it feels funny, then we will help them. Otherwise, they go around okay with that hood hanging down by their bottom. Go for it. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So you fill out the questionnaire. Think about what you're interested in, how you want to engage with learners, especially if you're volunteering. To think about what those pieces look like we talked about. Some of you come in and help with community dinners. That's the thing that you like to do. Or you like to go outside and to the back 4 acres with children. So those are all things that, to think about as you reflect. Some of you don't want to volunteer with children. You want to just volunteer in other ways. And so you check out the volunteer board in the media center, which will show you, a lot of times there's laminate to cut up or different things that they're making for the studio. So make a plan with what you want to do. Studios sometimes decide not to have volunteers, which we talked about. Cleaning. I think this is one of the cleanest schools on the planet. Do you agree? It's pretty powerful. The way that they maintain and support the environment. So we're going to see that in a minute. But it takes a lot of their time. And so the more time that they get volunteers, some studios have a slew of parents that come in every month and do that cleaning so that they can spend time on practicing materials and planning work and lessons and so forth. So if that's the thing that you want to do, well, that's super important too, and we'd love to have your support with that. So look at that. Woo! It's a lot of stuff in there. And all of it has a place to return. So it's not willy-nilly. So when I went through my Montessori training 20 years ago, my first step of it, 3 to 6 training, and then later went back to my 6 to 9, we learn how to sequence every shelf for the learning that's going to happen from those materials. And so all of it has a specific place. Sometimes for parents that have first been in the studio, it's really intimidating, and that child goes over and gets out something like the multiplication checkerboard, and you're like, I went and got my master's degree, and I still don't understand this. And so you don't have to understand it all. One of the powers of being in the environment, if you're a sub or you're a volunteer, is just listen and learn and ask questions. So what do you think? Not, well, what is 7 times 7? We don't want you to do that. We want you to do things like, so what made sense to you when you did that this time? Or what's the hardest part for you? Having them to be introspective about it, really powerful. But you can imagine, a certain shelf that might not be used 1 month versus the other can get pretty dusty. And so that preparation of the environment is a really big deal. All of the floors get buffed every week. There's things all the studios do all their own sweeping every night. So all of those parts and pieces are a part of that. We do ask that when you're subbing that you arrive 20 minutes before and try to stay 20 minutes after. Why? Do we want to punish you in some way, do you think? What's that? Yeah, so there's so much to do. So most of the time, I don't know, Faith, what do you think? Do you stay an hour probably in preparation every day? Yeah, especially once you have art materials out and painting. Like you could spend, Amy, how long preparing the paint shelf? Pretty long, yeah.
I just did it today.
You just did it today, so it's fresh in our mind. So there's things like that. Even down here at the center of the building, so we don't have children use the vacuum just because, it's really fun to run over pencils, and pencils hurt vacuums. And so they don't do that part, but a parent volunteer could do those pieces. So everything gets sanitized and rearranged, re-put back into their spots. And so all those things are part of that prepared environment. So daily schedules. Each studio is a little bit different. So each studio should have a subfolder. So if you're going into sub, they should be handing you the subfolder. Even if you've subbed 92 times, ask for the subfolder. And then you'll see all of this stuff for that studio specifically. For some subs, it's really important. They want to know, when is it I get to eat? And so you'll know, just ask that at the very beginning. We are a very open communication kind of group of people. You can ask anything at any time. That is okay to do. And we really encourage you to do it. But you can see kind of what, most studios, not all, early ed doesn't ever start, well, I think any of them do, with a class meeting. But most of the wood studios do. And so it looks different throughout the building. And so figuring out what that schedule looks like for them. When the work time is. When down here do they go to math lessons? When down here do they go to explorations or seminars? So knowing all of those words and getting to understand the schedules, a big deal. Anna, you've learned a lot about that over the last few years. 9 to 12 and Ion specifically, right? Different environments. How snack works in a specific studio. It's not really a schedule in all the studios. It's out for children to utilize. What time lunch is, what time outside time is. Sometimes we'll have what's called job or crew responsibilities, and then the beginning and ending day for the adult responsibilities. So we talked about, gosh, I might have this like 9 times in the slideshow. Arrive 20 minutes before, please stay 20 minutes after. So volunteer options and plans, know the expectation of the age level you're supporting. And that's tricky, because really we're going to talk about this some as we talk tonight, but with the 3 to 6-year-olds, even wearing perfume could affect the whole environment. Probably could be the same thing all throughout the building, but more specifically, those children are much more sensitive to smells. And so just being aware of that environment and what you want to do to prepare yourself for that Supporting discipline through inner discipline and self-regulation. Who wants to take a stab at that? What is inner discipline or self-regulation? Anyone have any thoughts they want to share? Come on, Linda, give it a shot.
Well,
You know.
inner discipline to me would be the child being able to process or think about this, am I going to do this action? What is my consequence going to be? And then self-regulation would be able to actually control that behavior or child.
Yeah. So this is a good time to share this article with you. So anyone see this? It was the New York Times. It's called "Which is What Better, Rewards or Punishments?" Can anyone see it? Which is better? Which is better from the community Montessori thought process? Let me give you some more help. Yeah, the answer is neither. We won't go over this whole thing, but if you walked into an early ed environment and a child comes up to you and says, "Look, I drew you a picture," and you said, "Oh, that is a beautiful picture. Oh my gosh, that's beautiful." Do you know what just might happen in the next 30 seconds? 20 other children are showing you, "What about my picture? What about mine?" And so inner discipline is trying to have a child feel happy or comfortable with something on their own without anyone else giving their approval about it. Some of us in the room are like, "Yeah, I wish I grew up that way. I wish my coworker grew up that way," right? But basically, it's a really important concept. And, sometimes as Montessorians, we feel on an island with this belief system. And frankly, we are in a lot of school settings on an island. Like, we don't have any kind of red, green, yellow, and most schools do, and most schools have removed punishment, but I don't know, there's still a way that some children feel punished. If I'm telling you what a beautiful picture, and then she goes over and Kim scribbles something real quick and shows it to me, and I go, "Well, that was just a bunch of scribbles," I'm punishing you, right? I'm making you feel less than somebody else. So we really try hard to look at children as individuals and not compare them. So we don't say to one child, "What a beautiful dress you have on," and the next child, "Oh, yeah." They know the difference between that. And so we try to stay emotionally equilibrium, which doesn't mean that we don't celebrate and have fun, because we do. But when we're having these conversations, we try to keep those emotions in a more stoic sense. And so when that child's excited, they finish the 100 board, they put all the tiles in place from 1 to 100, and they're excited, and I'm mirroring their excitement. They say, "Oh," and I say, "Oh," and we both sit there in joy and excitement, but I'm not telling him that he's only excited because now I've given him this nice sign of approval. See the difference? So it's a really important place, and I will tell you, in your best intentions, if you make that air in a studio, it could change the whole environment for the morning, for the day. Because then children start to see you as somebody that they could be fed off of, instead of feeling a sense of their own self-regulation and their discipline. Now, we want you as subs. We know you won't be perfect. It's okay. We all do that at times, And so we'll say things that make children feel compared. Our new grand twins, I'm like, "Look at you, you sweet girl." Well, I gotta say the same thing to him now. What did I do, And that whole process of, I want to try to help to make sure that children don't see any favoritism from one to the other, Or these 6 children because they're friends of your child, but you don't really know these, and so you come in and you talk to these 6 children every single time you're in the room, but these other children don't see that same experience from you. So even the words "good job," we try not to say. Sit with that a second.
Remember last year?
What?
The day after this, I came in and I was walking through the entryway, and Tristan did something. I said, "Good job." Crap, I'm not supposed to say that. And all of you laughed in the front room. I could see you in your office.
That is so funny. That is so funny. But sometimes just our awareness, and it's not because we think you're not a bad parent if you do that. It's just we're trying to support inner discipline and self-regulation. And so when you're doing that, when you tell a child, good job, and some of you are like, yeah, but it works, but for how long? And for what purpose? And those would be my challenges to you. And so instead, just like, like maybe some of us say to our spouse or partner, good job, but most of the time we get kind of offended by that, right? We feel like someone's, like, why are you saying that? And so children feel that way too sometimes. And there's certain children that makes them feel less capable when they feel like they constantly have to be told if they're doing it right or not right. And so we try to just remove that language. We don't say if it's correct or not correct. There's a time and place for that. We won't get into that a lot today, but the studio teachers do that differently depending on the child and development. But for your purposes, you'll come in and you'll want to say good job, and you might say it. And so we'll share with you things like just say, good golly jolly. Thanks for sharing that with me. Because that will help you to break the habit. And you'll start to notice your own child and the children around you respond differently when you're not always giving them the affirmation. Because for most of us, we want our children to feel a sense of self-worth and self-confidence and self-regulation, where we don't have to be so involved all the time in what they're doing or how they're doing it. And for some of us, we didn't grow up that way. We were told right and wrong, do this, here's the list, here's the reward chart, we get to go to Zesto if X, Y, and Z happens. But even the best of companies now really challenges that whole belief system as they recognize that even employees start to focus more on that. And now employers are saying, I just want you to do your job. I don't want to have to reward you because you did your job. I just want you to do your job. And so we've created a whole culture of that. And now people are starting to say, like, how do we change this now? And people have gotten used to that. And so one way to start is to just stop saying good job. If they made their bed, say, thanks. Thanks for doing that. I forgot mine this morning. Can you help me do mine? Just talk to them like we would to each other, instead of feeling like it's your job to do all of the things that make them feel good or bad about whatever was happening. I don't want to brush my teeth. That doesn't mean that they don't have to brush their teeth. That means you say, I hear you. Sometimes I don't want to brush my teeth. Didn't we make a plan? Yeah, we did, right here. Do you want to read it, or you want me to read it? Okay, so I'll read it first. So I remember I was going to brush my teeth. Oh, okay. You just want to go do it now? Or you want to wait until we read this? I'll just do it now. There are ways around all of that where you don't have to say good job, or you get this or you get that, and that could be a whole conversation, and I'm planning that for some time of the year because I've had enough people say it's been a couple years since we deep dived into that whole process again. But that Dr. Shivali Sabari, although she's not a Montessorian, she's a Montessorian at heart. And if you want to do kind of a parent read or a partner read, I really encourage you to do that. I've got those books up in my space. You don't even have to buy them. You fill out a piece of paper and take it home. And that conscious parenting thought process, which is just thinking before we act, most of us are just living in the paradigm that we grew up. We're just doing the things that we heard at school or our parents did for us. We're just doing it unconsciously most of the time. And so we step back and think about, my child's come up to me 6 times and said, Mom, can I have dessert? Mom, can I have dessert? Mom, can I have dessert? I'm thinking, what have I done to create that? Self-regulation would be to help them under the parameters that you give for your family's philosophy about what is dessert for our family and what does that look like. One of the families that came last year was talking about that they're very young children, 5 and 3 and 1-year-old, were having this conversation about what they value as food in their family. Like, what a way to start that conversation instead of saying, nope, I only said sweets after dinner. You only get 1 sweet. When we do that, we don't include them and we don't collaborate. And so, there are ways to do that in ways that children feel a part of the conversation instead of talked to. And so that's what we try to do every day in the studio. Even when the child says, I don't want to write the essay, I don't want to do this or that. I hear you. I get it. So I'm wondering if we could talk about what's happening that makes you feel like that right now. I want to go outside and throw a football, okay? So you're feeling as if your main focus right now is throwing the football. What about if you just talk about in your essay for today how to throw that football? What would be the steps? What kind of muscles would you use? What bones would you use in your arm? You know, and they're like, oh, I can do that. Okay, why don't you focus on that? If you need to take a break halfway through and throw the football for a few minutes, go do that and come back. You know? And so then they feel a part of that conversation. I could talk about that all day long, you know. Early education environments versus the elementary versus the teens, all a little bit different. In all the environments, we try to talk in a voice where just the people I'm talking to can hear me. For some of us, that's a manual switch. You know, we've got kind of the teacher voice or the adult voice, and we're used to expressing that very loudly. And sometimes you come into our spaces and you're like, I can't hear what anyone's saying. I don't know what you're telling me to do. You keep whispering to me. Well, if we're trying to just talk, you know, if you're doing something that might be affecting a child adversely, the adult, very kindly but courageously, will come over to you and say, by the way, we try not to do that. And you're like, huh? I can't even hear what you're saying. You'll notice that we're trying to talk. So just the person beside you. So you can always say, can you repeat that a little louder? But we really try to not be the obtrusive voice of the environment. When you do that in the 3 to 6 environment, it's a really noticeable thing. And so when you do it down here, sometimes they can just move on from that. So you might just want to think about that when you think about where you want to volunteer and sub. Sometimes you saw the hands go down as the children got older. We need subs down here too. These guys do take off and so forth as well. Kim is the #1 sub of that environment down there, so it's really a big deal. And they're lovely humans.
We have the best teams.
Yeah.
You're comfortable around them. They're comfortable with you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a real good environment. You learn a lot from them.
But you know, they have their own ways of being too, and they mostly know exactly what they want to do and need to do. And you might, not understand all those parameters. It might take a couple of times being down there to kind of get used to the flow. But it's fun, and it's really helpful for those people. Adult commitments, I won't get into all of that today, but it's really, in the subfolder it will talk about, as a staff, we've created what we value at each level, 3 to 6, 6 to 12, 12 to 18. How we are with children, how we talk with children, teens, what we do, what we don't do. And so in that folder will be the adult commitments for that level. Look at them, Tell us if we're not doing them. That's okay too. So those are all things that we try to do. Let me see if I printed out. I don't think I did. So the other one, the communication handout. So when Melissa Wiesinger shares this video in the next couple of days, she'll also share the link to the communications handout and the adult commitments. So you'll have all of those pieces with you and you can look over them. We really do look at them every single year. We revise them every couple of years, and so it's something that we really try to walk the walk on every day. Going out trip orientation. So some of you might just be here because you like to do the going out trip part. You work full time and really not able to come in and sub on a regular basis. And so there's a process for that too. And so you'll hear the teachers say the orientation for the going out trip is at this time. You have to be able to be there at that time, because it really is important information. Again, most of us will go back to what we knew when we were young. So there's kind of a process for all of that. If you really are coming to be with your child, you should let the teacher know that, and then you can make a decision if that's what's best at this stage of your child's life or development. And so, please come and make sure you know when that orientation is so you can hear those pieces too. So there's more materials that all have a way. People will say to me, how does this stay looking like this in the 3 to 6 environments? It's because of the prepared environment, not just the physical part, but how they talk to the children about handling the different materials. I'll never forget Child's Work Night a few years ago, and a parent was with their child, and the child was doing the tower of cubes, the pink cubes from the rooms, the largest to the smallest. And so the child, as has shown when he was given the lesson, puts a rug on the floor and takes the smallest cube and very carefully carries it over to the rug and places it it's a long process. What did the parent do? Yeah, picked them all up, had a shirt out, just stuffed them all in a shirt like this, and went over, go, here you go, hon. And now you're all ready. See, the material is the process, not just the product. And so, can you imagine a 3-year-old maneuvering through an environment with 7 different rugs down and jobs where they have to get to their own rug and put that cube down? That is work. That is a lot of work. And it helps with self-regulation. It helps with inner discipline. It helps with self-confidence. It does all of those pieces if we allow it to. And so sometimes our brain will go into, I can make this go quicker, or I can help this person do it better. Or they didn't start with the largest one, it's going to mess up, I should show them. We don't do it. We let them build the tower of cubes and learn from the experience. Even in our youngest environment, the nursery. Does anyone have children in the nursery in here? So our infants and toddlers. I was watching while this child was trying to put these little, there was a corrugated paper holder. It was just a corrugated part that they had put duct tape on. It was about 1.5 feet tall. And this child was going around putting little toys they found in them. She was about 1.5 years old. And then she found another one and she wanted to put it on top of the other one. Now this child was maybe 2.5 feet tall. And this was half their size. And so they went to grab this one and they went over and clink, just hit the other one. And they did it a couple of times and didn't know quite what to do. Put it back down and just started doing their thing again. A few minutes later they came over again and started to go. And on their own, from their own problem solving, put their hands lower and picked it up and put it on top of the other one. Now, to me, I'm sitting over there observing and watching. It wasn't hard for me because I knew what the development was and I knew what those children needed, which was to self-explore and to explore through the process. And so as they did it, they didn't look around for the adults to cheer or to get Cheerios or anything like that. They went, and they continued putting things on top into this big thing that they created. And other children joined them. And it was beautiful. And I thought, I want another baby. I want to start over at infancy. And Glenn's like, are you kidding me? No. But it is really beautiful. And so sometimes we just have to sit back and wait and watch instead of feeling like we know the answers and we know what needs to come next. And I knew that those teachers in the nursery were following through with that belief system because that child didn't need anything. They were self-satisfied from their own experience from that, which was beautiful. So preparation of adults. And so we talked about this article, which I hope you read, which is better, rewards or punishments neither. And so all of us in this room have different things that are automatic or manual for us. And so if anyone's open to sharing this process of preparation of the adult, like you did, it's a process. And so, we don't expect perfection at all. None of us are perfect in this building. I have most certainly made lots of mistakes throughout the years. But what we do try to do is learn from that experience and be humble, apologize to children when we fail, in their respect and their trust. And that happens. And so, that part of the preparation of adults is really important. Anyone have anything that comes to mind? Yeah.
I get easily excited when they do something. I'm just like, yay!
Yeah.
And so I have a hard time really self-regulating.
Yeah.
She does that with adults too.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, knowing our starting point's half the battle. It doesn't, so what we try to do is just hold, I remember saying when I first did my first observation and was watching this veteran teacher with these 3 to 6-year-olds, and I'm like, you have so much patience and so much will. How do you do that? And she goes, no. I really am not a patient person. You should see me at the line at the grocery store. I'm not patient. But I know the development of these children, and I know what they need, and that's what leads me. And so even if we're like that naturally, if we fall into the love affair of watching a child develop internally, it's easier, Because when we feel that pull or tug, and we just take a breath, or bite our finger, or sit on our hands, or whatever it is, that strategy to help us to stay present in the moment instead of the product of the moment or the main person that's going to decide, makes a difference. Any other thoughts or comments anyone wants to share?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So in your
Yeah.
So, I mean, does that kind of take away from what the teachers are doing here when you're not following through at the house? I mean, does it kind of level out or?
Well, I mean, obviously we're here in this conversation together because we think it works best when the environment at home is similar to the environment here. But the reality is each child's different, you know? And so I've seen families that have a blended family, and so one child, you know, when they go to dad's house is one way, when they go to the other dad's house it's a different way, and it works out for that child. And for another child, they melt down, right? So, you know, I think the best thing is to, you know, if you're here, you're probably here because you want to do things like this. And so keep reading and learning about it and being humble like you just did and say, okay, so here's the thing, like, I want their room clean. That's important to me, and I want them to make their bed every day. And so sometimes just identifying what those things are that are the most important and what you can let go of is the first step. You know? And so, and then saying that to the child, like, here's the deal. I have this thing that the bathroom sink can't have toothpaste in it. And so we're going to, you know, work as a family. Like, that's one of those things important to me. So now share something that's important to you. Mom, I don't want you to brush my teeth. You're like, okay. So, but how will I know if you got to the back of your teeth? I'll show you, you know, or whatever, right? And so you're having a conversation and you're coming up with a plan that you can both agree to, instead of you feeling like you've got to have control over this or that, and it makes them feel like they have less control. And so oftentimes when children feel less control, they have behaviors that are affiliated with that. Sometimes you'll see a rise in behavior, or you'll see, you know, like, you never talk to me like that. Why are you doing that? You know, like as they go through developmental stages, they'll try to find ways that they can control. So you can give them permission, you know, so what is it for you that's important to us? You know, and so.
You'll find yourself, because we started here, we've been here a long time.
Yeah.
And we started with my son, and he was like in 4th grade. You'll find, they'll come to you and say, can we make a plan? The more they hear that, they'll come to you and say, can we make a plan? And then, like, I was the same way. It was like, fix it, help them with the science project. And I have my daughter's here, and she's in the 8th grade. They won't let you do it. They're all independent. They do their own thing. They're self-sufficient, and they don't want anybody to judge anything they're doing. You know, if you say, I really like the color you use, and then they'll look at you like, are you telling me I should use a different color? You know, they're
Different
really
stages,
self-sufficient, and they will come to you and say, can we make a plan with this?
What is it? I keep hearing that word, the plan. Is that, I mean, my kiddo's 4. Can we start that now, or what does that look
You
like?
can, yeah. I mean, so I think, you know, you'll hear me say observation 1,000 times because that's where the Montessori philosophy starts and ends, is with observation. And so if you're observing in your child, for example, the bedtime routine is not working, and he's going to bed in tears, and you're going to bed in tears, and so you're observing this, and instead of like, I'm going to be consistent, you know, my daughter with twins, you know, she has a plan, but then, you know, she's also watching and observing and thinking about, is this plan really necessary, you know, or is it not? And so, you know, even with the 4-year-old, so it seems like you get really mad when I stop the book. And so I'm wondering what we should do to try to help this so that you don't, is it because you don't want to go to sleep? You know, like just having that conversation developmentally for them. Okay, so when you don't like it when I read the last page, it makes you feel sad. So what if we stopped at the second to last page of the book? And then you can just take the book and read the last page by yourself, and I'll read the room. You know? And so that could be a plan for a child if that's what the observation is and what the need is. You know, the reality is that, you know, we make plans with our spouses or partners, and, you know, and so we do those kinds of things without ever thinking about it. But sometimes we forget, like, that our child, even a very young child, has a belief, you know, has a thought about something, and including them in that can make the difference. Does that make sense?
So I have another example of a plan. I have a 10-year-old, and he doesn't always complete his work during the day, so he makes a plan with his teacher to either stay after school or bring it home. And that's like an agreement.
Mm-hmm.
He's made with her.
Yeah.
But it's a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And then you sit here for 45 minutes at this.
For some, yeah, for
Oh, it
some.
didn't have to be big, that's all.
Yeah. So So Marie Montessori said, we must help the child to act for himself, will for himself, think for himself. This is the art of those who aspire to serve the Spirit. So, if we believe that each child has their own unique human spirit, right? So our role is not to tell them what to do or what to believe, it's to help them to develop from within, right? So the whole motto of ours, education from within, means just that. It doesn't mean absence of any support or parenting. It just means to try to help them to develop that on their own instead of us being the one that tells them what needs to happen in that process. She also says, the mind takes some time to develop interest, to be set in motion, to get warmed up into a subject, to attain a state of profitable work. If at this time there is interruption, not only is a period of profitable work lost, but the interruption produces an unpleasant sensation which is identical to fatigue. So if you've ever noticed that your child's doing something, right? They're trying to plant avocados in the backyard, and they're getting really frustrated because we haven't had rain in 6 weeks, and they can't dig the hole the way they want to. And then you'll see them start to get really frustrated, and you'll want to go out and just fix it for them, right? You want to just go dig the holes so they can put it in there, and then everybody's happy. But the reality is that them working through that process and going through the fatigue and coming out at the other end sometimes makes all the difference. And it builds a sense of encouragement and self-confidence in them that they didn't have before. Just like that child putting their coat on. Like sometimes the hood's going to be down here in that process. As they develop and they realize, why is my hood down here? Or another child says, your hood's down at your bottom. They're like, huh, And then they might sit there for 20 minutes, maybe, trying to turn it around and put it on different ways. And we don't try to intervene with that. And it could look like they're getting really frustrated, And sometimes they are. And we might sit there, and it's really hard when we're trying to do something we're not really sure exactly how to do it. We might just sit with them for a little bit. Our natural instinct is to go in and show them how to do it so that they can be happy. But the reality is most of us aren't happy unless we can do it on our own, right? And so sometimes there's this false fatigue part that happens where it looks like a child is exasperated, but maybe all they need from us is to sit near them and to remind them it is okay to be upset. You can be frustrated at this. You really want to stop. Did you set a plan for this, or would it be okay to put it away? I don't know. You might want to ask Faith if there was a plan. Oh, I said I was going to finish at 25. Oh, so you said you're going to finish at 25? I'm wondering what you're on. I'm on 15. And so which part's the hardest? They're all mixed up. I wonder what we could do to make them less mixed up. Wait, I could organize them. Oh, you could organize them. How would you organize them? I could do them in 10s and 20s. Do you want to do that first? Yeah. You kind of slowly move away. So those are the things that we do to try to support them through the tough stuff so they don't feel like they can't do it on their own. Did you want to say something?
What do you do with a child 8 who gets so frustrated that she just goes down and says no more, and then decides that she's done, won't ever do it again?
Like puzzle or
random, any level of anything in her life.
Yeah. So I think the first part is to think what does she have in her environment that she can do independently. So sometimes we put things in children's environments that they can't do independently, and then we want them to be independent. And so the first thing is to look at that environment first and think, are there things they can do independently? And if they're doing something new, how am I going to, scaffold, coach, support them to feel confident with that? So sometimes it's just saying, so I see that you got the puzzle off of the top shelf tonight. I'm wondering how you're going to work through if you start to get frustrated because you can't find all of the edges. And you hold, and you wait for them to give a thought. And so sometimes they'll come up with, I just want you to fix it when it gets like that. And then we look internally and we say, have I been fixing it? When they've gotten frustrated. And so now they have an expectation, and now I'm trying something new. I remember doing this new thing with my daughters, and Janet and I were doing it with both of our daughters when they were about 11. And it was, so we'd look at the clock, and because we'd say, so what time do we all agree to go to bed? You know, whatever. We'd come to like a term of 10 o'clock. So we'd look at the clock and we'd say, it's now 10 o'clock. They're like, why are you doing that? Why are you all looking at the clock and talking to the clock? You know, like, it's now 10 o'clock. You know? Because the purpose is to make it about a thing and not about me versus you. And so, you know, sometimes just looking at whatever it is that's frustrating and saying, sometimes we can't find the edges that we're looking for. So what would you do at school? Would you put your name on it and you could try it again later or another day? You know, so you might create plans and things for that so that they can do that without feeling like they have to finish it. Some children, certain learning styles, if they can't do it right the first time and can't complete it the first time, and some of the times we go, they got that from me or whomever, right? Then they start to get an impression, a pattern that that's the way it always has to be. And so an 8-year-old, you could say, I'm wondering if, when I have done this and this, that you think that you always have to do this and this. Do you know you actually don't have to do this and this? You can actually do it this way if you want. And it doesn't mean they have to agree to it, or you have a Norman Rockwell moment. You just let it sit. And sometimes a day later or 2 days later, they'll say to you, you know what? I don't even have to do that. I could just do this. And you're like, huh. That's it. You don't say I told you so. You don't get into that. You just say, huh. Interesting thought. Thanks for sharing that, you know? It helps to build that. Go ahead. Woo, so here's the tough stuff, right? Helping versus hindering. Anyone got an example of that? We kind of did that. Yeah, Sasha.
Jackson had a paper that they were working on. He was in Turkey. And he had this paper. He was so excited. He'd been working so hard on this paper. He did really hard work. He studied, he researched. He was very proud of his work. And come time for PPC, Cece handed me the paper and she said, I kept this because I think you're going to want to keep this. And he wrote his entire paper on Brian tumors instead of brain tumors. And stopping him and saying, whoa, that's wrong. That would have really negated all of that hard work.
Yeah. So sometimes saying nothing in those situations. There's a time and place for that other part, but that wasn't the time and the place. Yeah. Observing versus staring. Anyone been guilty of that before? I go down with those new 3-year-olds every year, and I'm like, you know, so to observe is stoic. You know, to stare can make children feel uncomfortable, you know. And so sometimes we have to break the observation because certain children, especially certain learning styles, feel like, you know, creeped out when you keep looking at their stuff and what they're doing. So you just, you know, you kind of want to be low-key about it, especially if they're doing something you've never seen before, like building the Tower of Cubes with the brown stairs, and it's, you know, 6 feet tall in the air, and they're balancing it, and they're standing on a bench and putting the last couple pieces up, and you're like this, and, you know, and so, you know, so you can just be, because sometimes just smiling at a child is like saying good job. Have you ever noticed that before? Like your young child's playing in the playroom, and you go by and you're like, Mommy, I'm hungry. You know, you're like, what? You were doing so well. What happened? You know? So you broke their concentration by interrupting that with, you know, your sense of accomplishment. And so it doesn't mean you can't feel good about the things your kids do, but it's just trying to be aware of what those feelings do and what those emotions could do. Talking versus nagging. Has anybody done that before? A couple of us. And so again, I think that if you approach it like we're in this together, you know, like I can see that you feel like you should use your cell phone all day long, and that is your choice because you're 12 now. And you want to say, but I'm telling you what, I paid for that cell phone bill, and you can't. I'll take that phone away. You can't. You know, like we all want to say that. Sometimes we do. And it usually doesn't work out so great because we all get really angry and there's crying and fussing and discontent. And so instead, I told you about that cell phone. I told you, that whole repeated processing is to be really intentional. Like if we made this plan, then I'm going to be consistent with it, and we're going to stick with it. I'm not going to say, well, just this time. I'm going to say it once, I'm going to do 9 other things around the house, and then I'm going to say it again, I'm going to do 4 other things, and I'm going to say it, And this child realizes that they really don't have to do it until you say it the 3rd time, and you're screaming at them. So the talking versus nagging helps us to do that reset. And so even when you're in the studios here, that's the same thing. So, if you go up to a child, what work are you choosing? What work are you choosing? What are you doing? I don't see you doing anything. So all of a sudden they get you as like, I'm staying away from her. Jacob, if you know Jacob, how Jacob works down at that end of the building, the children will start doing this as you try to walk towards them. That probably means you've created a pattern with them about that, And so, sometimes just sitting with them, and just kind of being present. Sometimes just the proximity. They're talking about Marvel heroes. They've been doing this for a while. Faith has asked you to, if they start talking about Marvel heroes, trying to redirect them to something different. And so sometimes just by sitting near them or saying, I wonder if we're going to have an eclipse this year, can help to change that conversation just a bit. Encouragement versus praise. It's a hard one, So instead of saying good job, or if that child's really struggling with that, and you could say, well, looks like you've built already 3 parts of that. I wonder what it would look like if you kept going, And so we're trying to help them to feel that. Or, these 2 children are having a really deep-seated conflict because the one took the small pencil and that obviously belonged to the other child. And so they're really getting upset about it. And instead of saying, doing the catch me being good process, like, look how good you're staying calm or anything like that, you might just say, like, it is really hard to have a conversation when you're really upset. And I wonder if we all just take a deep breath, if we'd be able to have a conversation together, or if we need a few minutes just to get ourselves together. And sometimes just that. I think as adults and growing up in our culture, we don't want to get all tidied up before we're finished with the conversation, right? We've started it, now we want to finish it all tidy and put a bow on it. And most of the time, that doesn't help children to lead to self-regulation and inner discipline. It helps them to look to us for solutions. And we want them to think about how to solve the situation themselves. Listening versus being heard. We can listen to a child, but then we just keep saying the same thing we want to say. Instead of changing, active listening, changing our thought process because of what they're saying. I hear you, but we said you were going to tell about, you're not listening. I told you. All I keep thinking about is picture day tomorrow. Do you want to talk about how you want to dress? Do you want to try on some clothes? Yeah. Okay, let's go do that. We both agree that we're only going to try on 2 things tonight. And then I can wake you up earlier if you want to try on more things tomorrow. Okay. So it's just that being heard and changing that. Gain respect versus demand respect. For some families that come into the space, they're like, I'm not going to let that child talk to me that way. Well, it's probably not the right place for you to volunteer yourself. Just to be frank. But if you're feeling like that, we can help you. You can feel like that but not externally say it, right? And all of us have had different backgrounds in that. And so if a young person is treating you in a way you're not comfortable, then you go over to Faith and say, I'm not comfortable with this, I don't know what to say. And Faith will say, we all get to different places at different times. And so that child's not really trying to offend you, but let's just let them have their space right now. For some children, a new person in their environment shifts their whole world. And they act in ways that maybe the teachers haven't even seen, because they're uncomfortable. Their anxiety's up. There's different reasons that they're responding in different ways. And so what we try to do is really give them the benefit of the doubt, give them love and care, set appropriate boundaries, which won't be easy for you to do right away. But over time, we can help you to do that. Listen, you can be upset. I don't like it when you call me stupid. Can we talk about what we wanted to talk about in this book? Normative culture versus social rules. So down here, one of the support staff went into a studio and said, so, what's the process for cell phones during lunchtime? And was getting like 7 different answers from this group of teens. And so they were like, gosh, I wish I knew what the process was. So social rules means whatever the community has decided. Normative culture means what starts happening when no one's really watching or paying attention to it. And so sometimes you won't know, if you're in there for a few minutes while the teacher went out to get lunch, sometimes you just might have to say, well, for now, until Faith gets back, we're just going to not do that thing. So we could talk to Faith when she gets back, but we always do. Well, we could talk to her, it's no big deal. I just don't know about it, and I'd rather just wait. You just say that. High ethical standards for all we do and say, so we try not to use sarcasm or make children feel uneasy or unsupported. And so if we make a mistake, and we say, well, that was just rude. Gosh, I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to say that you were rude. I got offended by what you said. I think we need to talk about that at some point, but right now I feel like it's better for us to just let it go. And so you're making your own decisions for that and trying to stay very highly. Questioning any of us at any time if what we are doing is not what we are saying. We want you to let us know that. That is okay for you to do. We could say it with kindness just like we do with you. You could say, so I'm wondering, I thought you said this, but I thought I saw Amy do this. Oh. So Amy really wants to do this. She probably just wasn't thinking at the moment. Thank you for bringing that to our attention, right? So we want to hear that because we are not perfect. And sometimes a new person in the space helps us to recognize things we didn't even recognize ourselves. So we talked about preparing to break down the room, coming in with an open mind, refraining from any judgments. You might see that kiddo that was not kind to your child last spring, and now here you are in the space, they've come up to talk to you, and you really want to go, "Urgh," And so you're trying to have an open mind, have no judgment. You don't know all the children and all the intricacies. We have 22% of our children that have individualized education plans. You will not know that. That was confidential information. Children are more atypical than they are typical sometimes, especially based on development or whatever they're working through. Those are things you're just not going to know. And, we can't share that with you. And so sometimes you just have to give the benefit of the doubt and move on and trust that the process that's happening is probably what's best for that child in that moment. Like we don't make all the bad kids leave. We don't have bad kids. We have kids that do things. And sometimes mostly based on trauma or anxiety. And so it's our role as all the trusted adults to stay calm and supportive and then let the adults that are trained to do that in other ways. Keeping children and teens safe, supporting them physically, emotionally, socially, always facing them and overseeing activities. That's one of the hardest parts for a parent that starts doing a sub is they go over to talk to this child. Hi, you. And then all over here is like crashing down behind them. And so when they talk to this child, they face, their back to the wall. And so then they can see the whole space at the same time. So it's the number one thing for new teachers. We just try to move our bodies so our back is always against something and we can see this and see this at the same time. And so that'll be something the teacher will be out, maybe sign languaging to. We do a lot of sign language as well. Have a working understanding of the adult commitments that we talked about. Ask for specific things you can do, like I Spy, core reading, requesting numbers. So he'll get me 3,000 cubes. And so sometimes that just in yourself, if you're doing those pieces and parts, is really, really important and can help to keep the room kind of stable when it's under a transition. In some environments, when a sub comes in, they don't even notice a difference. In others, on a certain day, everything looks shifted. And so don't assume that's the way the environment always looks, because oftentimes it's just different because half of the studio support is not there. Balance of respecting, questioning their freedom and accountability. And again, that'll be different in every single studio, but if there's a balance of that, if you're not sure, you can look over at Faith from across the room and, you're doing the eye look and pointing, is this okay? And she's like, yeah, it's fine. Or she's like, no. You walk closer to the situation. So a lot of times we'll do some things like that, which you'll pick up when you're in the building more. Diverse discipline, defer that to the teacher and advisor. mostly collaborating instead of correcting. So even if a child's working on the movable alphabet and has written out all the words of the movable alphabet, is the sign-in sheet going around, by the way? Okay, great. Does anyone else need this? Sorry. When I see the word collaborate, it reminds me of that. So, you want to, so if they're doing the movable alphabet and they haven't spelled the word cat with a C, and it's driving you crazy, let it drive you crazy and don't say a word. Like, the teacher knows where that child is developmentally, just like brain tumor or Brian tumor. And so there's a time and a place for that, and it's usually in an isolated way and not in the moment where it makes them feel uneasy. And so, just think through that process as well. Direct versus indirect support. So me walking over and just kind of looking at the floor, maybe looking at this, might help her to get back into her mode again, instead of me coming over and doing this. Like oftentimes we'll try to walk beside the child and just look around, I see you painted your toes, and then we just might walk on. And that's more of an indirect support than going over and saying something to them specifically about what they're doing or not doing. Communicating concerns, provide consistency, and ask questions. So we love questions. You can never ask us too many questions. All right, so there's all the resources. You ready for the test? You're worried about the test? It's really simple. Just kidding. Here's the slideshow, if you'd like this. And so this last piece, if you could turn this in before you leave today. I'm going to give you a minute to take it. I meant to get 10. This is what makes you eligible to sub or volunteer. It's filling this out. Sure, we've got a question. We're passing those out. We'll see if we can answer this question. Just for me? If you want to volunteer. Yeah. So you got a 50-50% chance, right? They're true or false questions. Glenn's getting some pins. This is a pretty hard surface too. If you want to put it on here and write on it, you can do that. Yeah. Is there extra copies over here? Sure. Thanks. You're welcome. Yes, I changed a couple of questions from last year. We're going to go over the questions in just a minute.
My favorite part where we okay, piss down and see how good you did. That's a Montessori joke.
Hey Barbara,
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
He does not want to do anything, even though it's and I have a hard time with her, you're 7,
Yeah.
you still need to do stuff, and that makes me mad.
Yeah.
That's your rest
So the question is, how do you help a child who feels like they never need help? No one's ever experienced that in this room, right? So I think the trick is to catch them before they get in that mode. You know, like, you know when your child's in that snuggly moment with you, and you can have those really tough conversations? You know what I'm talking about? Like, you know, you're at home, you've been all silly, you've been playing, and you're like, you know, I was going to mention something to you. Do you remember when you kept telling me that, you know, you didn't need any help with making your lunch, but then you got really upset about the way your sandwich looked? So I think tonight, before we go to bed, we're going to make the peanut butter and jelly sandwich ourselves, but I'm going to do one, and I'll just show you, just like they do at school. I'll give you a lesson. I'll show you how we can get the peanut butter out without it making you maybe so angry. So we'll do that in a few minutes. So if you do it ahead of time, instead of once they're already in the mode of doing it, and then you're trying to show them how to do it, and they just want to do it themselves, sometimes that could be an effective way, and it helps them to hit that reset button. Or the other part is when you're making your own peanut butter and jelly, you're just talking through it out loud. So before I get the peanut butter out, I'm going to put a little bit of olive oil on the peanut butter, on the knife, so that it comes off or whatever strategy you're going to use. So you think about it like, how do I break it down steps so they don't feel like that they've done something wrong? All right, you ready to see how we did? Okay, so I'll read them and you tell me how you answered. Volunteers should have approved plans from teachers prior to volunteering. Okay? Studio assistants, subs, should arrive 20 minutes early and leave 20 minutes after pickup to support the preparation environment. One way to gain the respect of a child or teen is to talk loudly and tell them what they are doing wrong. False. Look at you guys. You're amazing. Adults should praise each child multiple times a day. False. Gold stars for all. On a going out trip and in the studio, any concerns should be communicated to the teacher immediately, and all volunteers should be non-judgmental to other learners. True. When a child or teen becomes angry, I should also get a staff member for help. True. Someone thinking of something when they thought false about that they want to share?
Just not being overly reactionary.
Okay, yeah. So I can see where you can feel like that. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So you don't want to be like, hey Glenn, get over here, this child's angry. Yeah. So it's just we don't want you to try to get in a situation where you're not ready for it yet. So you can just nonchalantly go, you know, to the teacher, you know, or this is a great sign language trick. You know what I mean? Help. So you just see this from across the room. First of all, the children will all see it before the teacher does. I can check out books in Barbara's space for my own learning. True. Background checks are conducted on all volunteers and studio assistants. True. The basic sub rate is currently $9 an hour. It can be waived for donation. True. And then you can talk about if you want to waive the sub rate. You can put which part you want to do, studio assistant, volunteering, or both. And then available times and days during the week. Any questions or thoughts or comments?